Good evening, folks, and welcome to our midweek Bible study. I appreciate you joining in with us this evening. Doing things a little bit different tonight. Again, another format, so thank you for bearing with us. I apologize. I think we're still having some trouble with our internet connection, so we are seeing some issues there. We've contacted the cable company trying to get all that resolved, so appreciate your patience with that. I apologize so much that it looks like that we're already having trouble trying to get the video out to you tonight. So we'll go ahead and do an upload again, possibly like we have done in the past, and we'll see if we can get a recording uploaded as well. I'm kind of not sure how that's going to work because we're in a different recording setup tonight, so we'll see what happens. Um, Maybe we'll be brief tonight. So, tonight, I apologize, I don't have slides for you. We are in Mark chapter 9. If you want to grab your Bibles and follow along, we left off it's actually been 2 weeks. We were in the study of the Transfiguration, and we walked through that and worked through that, talked about what we believe that means. There's a lot going on there. You can go back and watch that video and try to make sense of it. It's a doozy, and we've got more. Mark chapter 9 really has a lot going on. So bear with me as we try to work through this. Originally, my goal was to work through one chapter a week. That's more difficult than it sounds. It seemed like that would be a quick study. You're just not doing it justice. So we're going to try to move a little faster, but again, we're just hitting the high points. We're not doing enough. So I think that in some of these, when you would rather hear some more about that, I agree. I would like to spend more time on some of that also. So some of these maybe we're going to come back to sooner rather than later. Some of these we're just going to hit the high points in Mark chapter 9 and see what we can get through this. So Mark chapter 9, we are in verse 14. Jesus has come down the mountain. Jesus has explained to them that Elijah must come, and they are discussing what do we do now? What do we do next? They came together, verse 14, the disciples, they saw a large crowd around them and the teachers of the law arguing with them. As soon as all the people saw Jesus, they were overwhelmed with him, overwhelmed with wonder, and ran to meet him. What are you arguing with them about? He asked. A man in the crowd answered, Teacher, I brought you my son who is possessed by a spirit that has robbed him of his speech. Whenever it seizes him, it throws him into the ground. He foams at the mouth, gnashes at his teeth, and becomes rigid. I asked your disciples to drive out the spirit, but they could not. So we see the dilemma. Jesus has sent his disciples out. He's given them his power. He has given them direction. He has asked them to go out and to spread the word and to provide healing. And the disciples were struggling with this. Now remember, Jesus was on the mountain with only a few. He didn't take all of his 70 that he had sent out earlier. He didn't take all of his 12 that we hear about the 12 a lot. He took a few. And as those few then are coming down the mountain, we're hearing about the work of some of these other disciples. And what they are seeing then is they were unsuccessful. Verse 19, O unbelieving generation, Jesus replied, How long shall I stay with you? How long shall I put up with you? Bring the boy to me. So immediately, Jesus ties the failure to faith. Jesus is recognizing that the disciples have been given a mission, they've been given purpose, they've been given direction, they've been given power, they've been given ability, and in that failure to perform, in that failure to achieve those results, Jesus doesn't say that he's given them a mission that's impossible. Jesus doesn't say that he hasn't given them enough power. Instead, Jesus doesn't fault the power in him and the power of God. Jesus faults where fault is, which is with us. when we are not fulfilling our mission, when we are not successful in what God has called us to do. It's not because God has set too great a mission before us, and it's not because God is inadequate. But what we see in these next few verses, it's our faith. Our faith is inadequate. I believe, I think I know, and we'll see some powerful thoughts to that in these next few verses. I think I know, but when my faith is then tested, challenged, when I have to rise to the occasion, well, that is when I see my faith for what it really is. And sometimes that means not enough. They brought him, verse 20, they brought the boy to Jesus. When the spirit saw Jesus, it immediately threw the boy into a convulsion. He fell at the ground, rolled around, foaming at the mouth, just like they said. Verse 21, Jesus asked the boy's father, how long has he been like this? From childhood, he answered. It has often thrown him to the fire or the water or tried to kill him. But if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us. Jesus recognizes the faith mixed with fear, the doubt and the faith together. There's enough faith that the boy was brought to Jesus. There's enough faith that they know where the answer belongs. There's enough faith that they go to Jesus, but they still doubt. Jesus recognizes this. Verse 23, he says, if you can, he asks, question mark in your Bibles. If you can, Jesus said, everything is possible for him who believes. Again, we see it tied back to faith. Immediately, the boy's father exclaimed, and here he is. He's speaking for me, y'all. I don't know where you see yourself in some of these stories, but some of these histories of the tellings of what went on and who said what when, I'm right there in the thick of it. And this person recognizes their inadequacies. They recognize that their faith is not sufficient. They know that they should have more faith in Jesus, and they know that Jesus can solve that problem. So they have some faith. They know they need more faith. And where do they go to get more faith? Jesus. So how do we have a conversation with Jesus? How do we go to Jesus just as this person did? Well, we can too, because we can go to God in prayer. We can focus our minds. We can focus our hearts. We can set aside the things that worry us. We can try to pray about it. And you say, I can't pray about it because I'm worried too much about it. Okay, just take a deep breath. Take a moment. Set some time aside. Make your spiritual life a higher priority. If you say, I don't have time to study it, I don't have time to think about it, all I have time is time to worry about it, we've got to figure out how to rearrange our priorities. We got to figure out how to make time to be with our God. And that's okay if that's early in the morning. That's okay if that's late at night. But heaven forbid that we be so busy that we don't have time to get into prayer and study with our God. And when we recognize in our own inventory of our soul, of our faith, of our strength, of our encouragement to one another, of our service to one another, I recognize that there is a shortcoming in what I am doing and not doing. I recognize that I think I believe, but when it comes time to do more, when it comes time to step out, I'm not willing to take the chance. I'm not willing to take the risk. I don't have a faith that is so sure that it says, you know what? It's not even a risk. I know. It's not taking a chance. I know this is what God has prepared for me. So in verse 24, we see prayer. That's the answer. Look at the raw honesty in this prayer. Immediately, the boy's father exclaimed, I do believe. Help me overcome my unbelief. And we might think in a digital world, we might think it's just on or it's off or it's there, it's not there. We aren't willing to think sometimes in degrees or quantity. We think either you have faith or you don't have faith. You believe or you don't believe. And we recognize that I have faith that is growing. I am maturing in my Christian walk. I hope you are. I hope you're maturing in your Christian walk. There is progress to be made. There is progress needed. And he says, I do believe. but I fear, I worry, I wonder, I'm not sure. So he says, help me in my unbelief. He sees that as a mixture of both belief and unbelief. And there he is, raw and unfiltered, speaking with Jesus. I do believe, help me with my unbelief. When Jesus saw the crowd, verse 25, was running to the scene, he rebuked the evil spirit. Remember, Jesus is still not wanting everyone to know everything just yet. He is working on the mission unfolding as he wants to, in his control, in his time. There's another great lesson we're not spending enough time on as we run over that verse again. Jesus is taking his time and wanting to unveil the message by the people he chooses, in the manner that he chooses, in the time that he chooses, in particular with his ministry towards the cross, as he wants to be near Passover. So Jesus says, no, now's not the time, right? We've seen him say that over and over again. Jesus saw the crowd. He rebukes the spirit. You deaf and mute spirit, he said, I command you to come out of him and never enter him again. The spirit shrieked, convulsed violently, and came out of him. The boy looked so much like a corpse that many said, he is dead. But Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him up to his feet, and he stood up. After Jesus had gone indoors, his disciples asked him privately, remember, this goes back to a few verses ago when it says that I asked your disciples, verse 18, I asked your disciples to drive the spirit out, but they could not. So the disciples asked Jesus privately, it says in verse 28, why couldn't we drive it out? Why couldn't we drive it out? Why couldn't we succeed? Why couldn't we accomplish the mission that you gave us? We worked really hard. We tried really hard. We took on a lot of extra duties. We pushed our boundaries. We were uncomfortable, but it didn't work. What's going on? Maybe they were missing the point. Now, I don't want to read too much into this, and I don't want to judge anyone's heart and anyone's soul, but I know the dangers of pride. I know the dangers of having a little success and thinking that you are the cause of all of that success, that you are the driver behind all of that. You are the reason anything that is going well goes well. Anything that's going pretty good is going pretty good because you're the one that's involved in it. The dangers of pride, the dangers of a lack of humility, the dangers of recognizing the true source of power. Why are the people even around the disciples? Is it because of the disciples or is it because of Jesus? Did they possibly think within their heart, within their faith that was needed, just as this man was willing to say, I do believe, help me overcome my unbelief? Maybe there was a lack of faith in their part as well. And maybe they got distracted from the mission and they were more focused on the persona that they were finding themselves surrounded by, this persona that they are able to portray as a follower of Jesus who has a successful ministry, who has performed certain healings or given certain teachings over time. Something's going on here that's not right. And what does Jesus tie it to? Verse 29, he replied, this kind can only come out by prayer. Now, some translations have prayer and fasting. You may have a footnote that says prayer and fasting. You may have it in the top, and then the footnote says some things only say by prayer. One important aspect of thinking about fasting, again, something we're not spending enough time on if we just going to gloss over this fairly quickly. Don't time me. Fasting, the way Jesus would link prayer and fasting to this ministry would be around focus. So the disciples who would be fasting would be spending more time in prayer, would be, like we said a few moments ago, about distractions, about busyness, about I don't have time to pray about it. I only have time to worry about it. I don't have time to bring it to God. I'm trying too much just to handle it all myself. So Jesus mentions fasting. Some manuscripts have that. You have a footnote. Maybe it's in the top. Maybe it's in your verse. It's okay that it's that it doesn't change a whole lot. The aspect about fasting being mentioned is that it's connected to your ability to focus in your prayers. So in fasting, you are removing something that you are focused on, something that you are consumed by. What if everybody's worried about where's my next meal coming from? That you take a break from all of that and you say, I'm in control. God's in control. I am fasting, and in doing that, that's going to allow me to see that God's in control and see God's provisions. So Jesus says this kind can only come out by prayer, or maybe by prayer and fasting. So Jesus again links success to faith. He says they weren't able to fulfill their mission. They couldn't accomplish the task that God had set before them because maybe it was a faith problem. Maybe it was a prayer problem. Maybe it was prayer and fasting problem. Maybe it was something where their heart wasn't right, their mind wasn't right. And so Jesus explains that connection. This can only come out by prayer and fasting. Verse 30, they left the place where they went through Galilee. Jesus did not want anyone to know where they were because he was teaching his disciples. He said to them, the Son of Man is going to be betrayed into the hands of man. They will kill him, and after 3 days he will rise. So for them, this is new information. A lot of us have heard this. Maybe we've heard this our whole lives. We've heard that this is coming. Now, for the disciples, it's a shocker. Mark is kind of teasing this out in the way that we're seeing Jesus teach this in the gospel. We are seeing that there is the prediction, there is the transfiguration. You have Jesus being rebuked by Peter to say, may it never be. And then now that teaching is getting expanded. And they're seeing that Jesus will indeed die. And they are surprised by that. They did not understand what he meant, and they were afraid to ask him about it. Okay, so the next section, starting verse 33, they came to Capernaum when he was in the house. He asked them, what were you arguing about on the road? I love the way this is introduced. Not a lot of info that we get. We're not really privy to the conversation as it happens. We're privy to the conversation after the fact that Jesus asked them what they were arguing about. Verse 34, they kept quiet because on the way they had argued about who was the greatest. Okay, so they immediately know there's an issue. Whatever's going on in the background that we don't have all the information about, Mark here tells us what they're arguing about. They're arguing about who's the greatest. Is that really a good topic for Christians to debate with one another? Is that really what a humble leader looks like? Are they debating who is the most humble among them, and they're arguing who has the more humility? They're arguing who's the greatest. And it's a great tie-in to the problem that we're seeing throughout this whole chapter is the problem of faith, the problem of trusting, the problem of using your spiritual lens of understanding what God has asked you to do and going ahead and doing those things. And so they've got it backwards. And instead of thinking about who will be the greatest servant or who will be the greatest follower, they're worried about who's the greatest. They don't want to be below a rank of someone else that's in their group. Sitting down, Jesus called the 12 and said, if anyone wants to be the first, okay, it sounds like that's what they want. So maybe their ears perk up. Yeah, that's what I want. I've been arguing that I'm going to be the greatest. He says, if anyone wants to be the first, he must be the very last and the servant of all. That is truly a wonderful Christian teaching that we should all be aspiring to. We should all be aspiring to achieve this standard of where can I serve more? Who can I help? Who can I honor? Who can I show that I love them? Who can I provide care for? Who can I call, send a card? Who can I make a meal for? Who can I take a meal to? Jesus says that as his followers, our goal, our aim, our purpose, our understanding is to serve. And these folks, the way that they're arguing here, it really sounds like they're more interested in being served. They want to have that honor. They want to have that esteem. They want to be adored. And then the red carpet rolls out for them when they walk in the room and everybody says, here they are. No, Jesus says not like that. The kingdom's different than that. And when you want your faith to grow, one of the ways you can do that, he just said a moment ago, prayer and fasting. One of the ways you can do that, service to others. You need your faith to grow? Are you finding yourself saying, Lord, help my unbelief? Lord, help me believe. Help me have more faith. Start trusting him enough to start serving him, and you're going to see your faith grow. Verse 36, he took a little child and had him stand among them. Taking him in his arms, he said to them, whoever welcomes one of these little children in my name welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me does not welcome me, but welcomes the one who sent me. So Jesus is then going to use an example where we maybe see other people in our lives that we don't trust, that we're not so sure about, that we want to look at their appearance, or maybe we think we know something about their past or something about their present situation, and we start to judge that they're not welcome, that they're not good enough, that they don't deserve to be around Jesus. Jesus then takes this ultimate example of this little child, of someone that would be innocent, and he says, you need to start treating each other the way that you would treat this innocent child, that you would love them and that you would care for them, that you would serve them, that you would teach them, that you would help them grow up in the Lord. And that's what all of us are striving to do. We are all striving to grow up in the Lord. We are all striving to have our faith grow, to say, Lord, help my unbelief. And we can do that. We can do that through our prayer, through our time together, through our opportunities to serve one another and to serve our community. We're going to stop there and save these last few verses within Mark chapter 9 for next week. We'll do a three-parter for Mark 9, and then we'll see how the rest of the book of Mark goes. I want to thank you for joining us tonight. I apologize that we've got a little bit of a crazy setup going on and probably some technical difficulties going on, but I want to thank you for joining us, and I hope to see you again next week at worship service. Sunday school at 9:30 and worship service at 10:30.